Toyota engines are way more reliable than European engines. Stick to your unreliable Euro trash that stuffs out at 100,000 kilometres, Woga. VW is unreliable garbage. 2JZ has a good reputation for its strong reliability. That's something BMW doesn't have. Love driving? Buy Japanese. Love fixing, or better yet, paying someone else to fix? Buy European. Kiwi Car Life is the definition of European is the answer to everything, even though their build quality is so over-engineered and they're the worst things to work on. Nonetheless, I just find that BMWs are unreliable as, and all Euros are. And the Falcon hate makes me laugh. It's so much stronger than BMW. Falcon, why? Because they are more reliable and won't cost 40 grand in repairs. European, endless money pits. New Zealanders hate European cars. But why? Well, to answer this question, I think we first need to figure out what cars New Zealanders do like. In my experience, there are 4 different types of car enthusiasts in New Zealand. First, we have the Japanese enthusiast, and this is split into 3 different subcategories. You've got your mid-20s guy with a student loan and a couple grand in his account. So he drives something like an old EK Civic, a Corolla FX GT, an Accord Euro, an Altezza, a Swift Sport, or a Skyline 350 GT. Then you have your mid-30 finance bro who's now got a bit of money behind him and he wants a cool modern JDM car. So he drives a Civic Type R, a GR Corolla or Yaris, a 400Z, a Supra, or a BRZ. And finally, you've got the wealthy young dad in his 40s who grew up with an R34 GTR on his bedroom window, and now that he can finally afford a JDM Hero car, he's got a GTR, an NSX, a Supra, an RX-7, a Silvia, or an Evo. Next, we have the Australian car enthusiast, and there's 2 different types here. First, you have the young bogan, whose primary goal in life is to rid the world of as many cheap Linglong tyres every Friday night. So he drives a no-off, no-reg, no-worries VT Commodore with a Rattletech V6 or an AU Falcon. He also strongly believes that it is the best car in the world. And then you have the more well-off Aussie car enthusiast who drives an FG XR6 Turbo with an outrageous amount of power or a VF Commodore SS with a rowdy exhaust. Thirdly, we have the classic car enthusiast, and once again, there's 3 different types. There's the classic American car enthusiast who tend to be older and think that 200 horsepower from a 7-litre engine represents the pinnacle of engine technology. You have the old JDM guys who might have a classic RX-3 or Toyota Cresta, and you have the English car enthusiast who maybe has an old MG or Triumph. And finally, you have the European car enthusiast, where I also believe there's 3 types. You have the modern German enthusiast who like BMW M cars, Audi S and RS cars, Mercedes AMGs and Porsche 911s. You have the French hot hatch guys who love a Renault RS or Peugeot GTI, and finally the classic Euro guys who drive an old E33 series or 60s Mercedes. So naturally there's quite a spread between the 4 different branches of New Zealand car enthusiasts. But an interesting phenomenon occurs when you cross-pollinate between these 4 groups of car enthusiasts. The JDM guys often quite like the classic cars too, especially if someone's resto-modded a rad old Datsun 120Y or Corolla. They also tend to like the Aussie cars, as there's no denying for years they offered great value performance with extremely reliable power plants. But they don't so much like the European cars, as they're perceived as being unreliable, expensive to fix, and boring to drive when compared with their stripped out DC2 Integra that just drives like nothing else on the road. The Aussie car enthusiasts also quite like the classic cars, as many of them are basically the predecessors to what they drive now, with a big burly V8 up front and less gears in the transmission than they have beers every Friday night. They also like the Japanese cars, as like with the Aussie cars, they can be run on a shoestring budget, withstanding copious amounts of neglect and abuse without braking. But they absolutely despise European cars with a vengeance and will refuse to even entertain the idea of going near one because their mate's brother's dad had a BMW 116i 10 years ago and it was an endless money pit, which therefore renders every European car an unreliable sack of garbage. Ow. And finally, the classic car enthusiasts. These guys like simple and Well, now they're 50 years old, unreliable cars they can get their fingernails dirty tinkering with in the garage with a basic Imperial socket set that, quote, don't have any of those newfangled computer thingies in them. So naturally they have the old girl in the garage with a 2004 Toyota Corolla as their daily driver and wouldn't touch one of those complicated European cars with a barge pole. And yet, in my experience, and I don't want to sound all high and mighty, but the European car enthusiasts just seem to get that, yeah, absolutely, the Japanese cars are probably more reliable, and the Aussie cars are built tougher, and the classic cars offer a more driver-centric experience. But they don't despise all the other offerings, they just choose not to buy them and get on with their day. So, why this disparity? Why is it that European cars in New Zealand and Australia in particular are so universally hated, when around the rest of the world they're generally received quite positively? Well, in my experience, the Japanese, classic and Aussie car enthusiasts have three main complaints directed at the Euro scene. Firstly, they say that Japanese and Australian cars are more reliable, and yeah, the majority of them are, mainly because a lot of these manufacturers did all of their innovating in the 1990s and just kept using the same engines over and over and over again all the way into the 2010s. Mitsubishi, for instance, used basically the same 4G63 in the Evo from 1992 to 2008. Audi's similar all-wheel drive sports sedan, the S4, received 5 completely different brand new engines during the same time period. The Ford Falcon used basically the same Barra engine from 2002 until 2016, which itself was a mildly updated version of the old Intec engine that traces its roots back to the 1980s. Meanwhile, BMW's 5 Series received 20 new engines in the same time period. So yeah, if you keep using the same old engines for the best part of 2 decades straight, well, they'll probably be quite reliable. European manufacturers, on the other hand, lead the world in research and development, which is why they're often the first to introduce features that we all take for granted today. Mercedes gave us the airbag, ABS, stability control, adaptive cruise control, and the 5-speed auto. Volvo gave us the first seatbelt. Audi was one of the first to offer ordinary road cars with all-wheel drive. BMW gave us the infotainment system, the electric water pump, and the 6-speed automatic. Porsche gave us Active Aero and the first 6-speed manual, and Volkswagen gave us the dual clutch gearbox and were the first to adopt turbochargers and direct injection en masse. All these features were pioneered by European manufacturers primarily to improve the performance and efficiency of their drivetrains to help them meet the ever more stringent European emission standards in their home countries. However, because they are often the first to test new ideas out, they all require careful maintenance and will absolutely not put up with any neglect whatsoever. People in New Zealand seem to think that if a car requires anything other than just a basic oil change every year, well then it's automatically unreliable. People here will get rid of a car because it starts misfiring, but instead of fixing the problem by replacing the blacked out 20-year-old spark plugs, they'll just get rid of it and buy a new car from a different, more reliable brand. Many Kiwis, I feel, kid themselves into wanting a reliable car, when really what they want is a car that can withstand years of neglect and abuse, which European cars aren't terribly good at. But for those of us who do actually maintain our cars properly, many complain that European cars are expensive to maintain. But is that still the case in 2025? Well, let's put it to the test. Let's compare 4 different compact sedans from the mid-2000s. On the Japanese side, we have the Honda Accord Euro and Mazda 6, and on the European side, an Audi A4 and BMW 325i. All 4 of these cars make roughly the same amount of power, and we're going to treat this as a worst-case scenario, where just about every major part on the car needs to be replaced. We're buying all of these parts from the same website and using the same brand for all the parts where possible. We're going to do an oil change with some Castrol Edge and a MAN oil filter, and then we're replacing the MAN air filter, Continental accessory belt, NGK spark plugs, Denso coil packs, Bosch alternator, Sachs clutch, Nissan's radiator, SKF water pump, which is a bit more expensive on the BMW because it is the only one that uses an electric water pump, Sachs shock absorbers, Bosch brake pads, and Brembo brake rotors. And we discover that in fact the cheapest car to maintain is the Accord Euro, but close behind is the Audi A4, with the Mazda 6 being a little bit behind that, and the BMW is quite a bit more expensive thanks to the electric water pump and its much more beefy brakes and suspension components. But if you take those parts out, because let's be honest, the BMW is definitely a bit of a step up in terms of the driving experience when compared with these 3 other more normal cars, they all work out to be within a few $100s of each other, which, given this is a pretty significant service we're talking about here, is really not all that much. Now sure, if you're comparing your 90s Civic Civic with a modern BMW M car, well then obviously the new BMW is going to be a lot more expensive to maintain. But once all cars get to be a few years old, well, a brake pad's a brake pad and a spark plug's a spark plug. Gone are the days when European cars were significantly more expensive just simply because they were European. If you buy the parts from the right place, no matter what brand you're buying from, they should all work out to be roughly the same. And finally, New Zealanders claim that European cars are boring to drive. And yeah, sure, a lot of them are. I, for one, find that the concept of a 4-cylinder engine that sounds like a sewing machine paired up with an all-wheel drive system in a generic 2010s hatchback to be a rather dreary hot hatch experience. But there's no denying that while the Japanese know how to make super raw and engaging driver's cars and the Australians know how to make big powerful motorway cruisers, only the Europeans truly know how to do both. Take my Audi TT for example. If this car was made by Honda, it would have red bucket Recaro seats, a Momo steering wheel, a single-din radio here, and no other features to speak of whatsoever, which would make it fantastic to drive because it'd be super lightweight. But it would also really narrow its use down to just a weekend toy, which would mean then I'd have to have another car, like an Accord Euro or something, to make up for it so that I could use that on the daily. But because my Audi TT is not made by the Japanese, it has the perfect combination of both cars. I've taken this car on significant road trips multiple times this year with my music playing on the Bose stereo system, cruise control for the open road, lights and wipers that come on automatically, comfortable heated leather seats and quiet interior. But press these 3 buttons down here to stiffen up the suspension, disable the stability control and deploy the rear spoiler, and while not quite as engaging as a 2000s Japanese car, it is pretty darn close. A lot of people seem to think that European car means a brand new 2025 mid-range 3 Series, but no, it's stuff like this. Naturally aspirated VR6s, straight 6s, V8s, V10s, paired with a manual transmission with sensational hydraulic steering. BMW, Volkswagen and Audi produced some of their very best driving cars during this era, and I feel like so many people are missing out just because they write them off as being boring and unreliable. Having owned 3 classics, 3 Australian cars, 17 Euros and 28 Japanese cars, I've come to the conclusion that I'd just rather maintain one slightly expensive Audi that can truly do it all rather than multiple Japanese or Australian cars. And finally, can't we all just get along? Some of the most fun cars I've driven have been a sideways machine Aussie Commodore or that mesmerising STI Type RA. And yet, because I happen to like a few European cars as well, then suddenly my opinion is totally invalidated. We're living in what could be the final decade of true driver enjoyment. And so, whether it be in a modern Euro or a classic Australian muscle car, I urge you to go forth and enjoy.